Hello, everybody. It's Michael Hollands once again for Sound of the Movies. Today, I have the pleasure to be joined by Mark Snow, the iconic composer behind the music of a variety of great projects such as Starsky and Hutch, Dynasty, T.J. Hooker, Heart to Heart, The X-Files, Millennium, Ghost Whisperer, Smallville, and many, many more. It is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Mark Snow.
Thank you very much.
It's great to have you on my show. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your schedule. I really appreciate that.
Of course.
Great. And I just mentioned a few projects in my introduction. And of course, you have done way more than I could possibly list in my intro because I would still be talking probably 2 days from now. So
That's
when
fine.
when he started out in this business, there was
Mm.
probably a lot of competition. You know, he started in the TV world and then subsequently he started doing TV movies and also live action movies and so on. What was it like to start out in this business and who would start your career?
Okay, good question. And a simple answer to that, which is I disagree with you about all the competition, okay? Because at that time, which was around 1975, something like that, there was no video, there was no uh, synthesizers, you know, it was all the music by anyone was all acoustic, different size ensembles, live ensembles. And I think that hmm, the majority of the underscore for the TV shows were somewhat, a little bit toward more of a jazzy feel, which I that was not kind of my thing. But how I got started was my wife and I and our two kids at the time, now we have three, moved out to California from New York. And I had no work waiting for me out there. But she had a family and still does of people who were actors. And she thought she had the confidence that one of those relatives might be able to introduce me to someone that would give me a chance. And that's what happened. Her brother in law, who was in an Aaron Spelling show called The Rookies, uh, I had a cassette tape of some music that he brought to Aaron Spelling. And he said, "Hey, give this guy a chance. He's really great." And Spelling said, "I don't want to hear about music or tapes. Can he do it?" And my brother-in-law said yes. And that was that. And I got to do this show, episode of this show where actually of all people, not Leonard Bernstein, but Elmer, of course, Elmer Bernstein wrote the theme. And it was a cop show and fairly standard uh, music that I heard from the other composers. And the episode I did was a very soft, special episode about a kid with special needs was being held by some bad guys. Anyway, I decided to put aside the loud music and I wrote this theme with a ocarina flute sound, and it was for the producers so different. I didn't think it was particularly brilliant, but it was so different from what they had heard. So they wanted me to do more, and I did. And that led to everything after that. I think, I talked about, oh, my relatives helped me. And well, my father-in-law, who was an actor who passed away, got me an interview with, of all people, Lionel Newman, who was head of Fox. And he was so nice to me. I couldn't believe it. Um, anyway, he put his arm around me and he said, "Okay, kid, come on, let's take a walk." Oh, all right. We're walking around the lot. He said, "Now look, here's how it is. You got to believe in yourself. Do you?" I said, "Oh yeah, I do." He said, "That's great. That's the most important thing. And you'll get a break. You'll see. I got a good feeling from you. Things are going to work out. Okay? Yes, sir. Goodbye." You know. So that was that was interesting walking around the 20th century lot with him. So when you talked about my credits, when you said, this is kind of a fun story, when you said Dynasty, well, Bill Conti did the Dynasty theme.
Mhm.
I did a few episodes, and the producer of that show was a man named Doug Kramer, who was one of Aaron Spelling's partners. Doug Kramer heard my music, didn't like it, and he said, "We gotta find some other people because I want Puccini. I don't want this TV music. I want, the real thing." Anyway, some someone else came in, and I'm sure he didn't do Puccini, but he got the gig, and but that was great for me because I was doing things sort of the same way up until that point, and I thought I better think of other ways of writing music, you know. So getting canned on that was really a positive for me. There you go.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mark. And as I understand, you met a variety of people early on in your career, and you also at some point met the great Bernard Herrmann. I think you met him during the Taxi Driver recording session. And I know you told that story to somebody else, but I just need to get that on my show. May I kindly ask you to recount the events of
Yes.
this meeting and how it influenced you or impacted you? Because I heard he was quite the character besides being a great composer.
Yes. Well, I was lucky enough to have a friend who knew him and got me to go to the recording session of Taxi Driver, where it was at Warner Brothers. I sat in the back. There was Scorsese and talking, the to the headphones and the speakers. And Herman was not conducting because he was too fragile. He was really old. He didn't look particularly well. He was overweight, and there was a 10-minute break, and my friend said, "Hey, you want to meet him?" And I said, "Wow, sure." So he takes me out and he introduces me to him. And Herman says to me, "Who are you?" And I said, "Oh, well, my name is Mark Snow. What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I do TV shows." "TV? That's horse shit. Come here." And he grabs me by the wrist, takes me over to this desk where he has this crappy looking briefcase. He puts his hand in, mushes around, and he pulls out this baton that looked like the rats had just eaten part of it. And he throws it, forces it in my hand. And he said, "Here, take this. Now get out of here and don't do any of that TV horse shit." End of story. It's not over, not by a long shot. Okay, the session is over. Musicians file out. I go to my car. I'm driving back to Santa Monica from Burbank. Uh, on the radio, uh, well known, famous movie composer Bernard Herrmann found dead at the Universal Studio Hotel uh, in Universal City. And I thought, Jesus, I've got the baton. Herrmann just died. What could this mean? Well, it could mean a lot of things, but I had to pull the car over so I could just get my wits about me. And so I got home and I put this baton in a safe place and subsequently sealed it up hermetically, which I still have now. Uh, and I was I was waiting for, you know, like some mystery movie or mythology movie where I had just been handed the Holy Grail and miraculously, things were going to go great for me. Well, that wasn't the case, but things did go well for me. They were going well, slowly, very slowly. But that's that's a good story, and that's it.
Great story, thank you. And it must have felt very awkward to have met him and then find out a couple of hours later that he passed away. I mean,
Yeah,
that's really shocking. And
yeah.
he left behind a great legacy of music. Did you ever find out why he thought TV was horse shit and why he thought so low of this particular field? Has anybody ever explained that?
No, well, I think, believe it or not, you probably know this, but he did quite a few episodes of the original Twilight Zone, um, and probably some other TV things. And when he started working for Hitchcock, um, I think he felt, now this is the real deal, you know. This is where I could get my big orchestra uh, sound and, all the wonderful orchestrations he did. In my opinion, I think he was sort of a bridge between the great Eastern European composers, Max Steiner, etc., to more modern minimalism, actually. So, but I mean, like Vertigo and God, all Psycho. I mean, the simplicity of some of those scores is astounding. And then all of a sudden, bang, the orchestra erupts with the most thick, detailed orchestration. You know, the thing about that Taxi Driver orchestra uh, was it was like a baritone orchestra. There were no violins, there were no high strings, there were no high anything. It was just a ton of French horns, eight percussion, the low woodwinds. That's one of his sort of, I hate to say cliche sounds, but that low bass clarinet and low contrabassoon sound was sort of a hallmark. Uh, but the idea was just big and angry and loud, Plus, there was a beautiful love theme on alto sax. So, but he looked pretty poor and he was pissed off. He was kind of pissed at everything. Uh, there was a moment when Scorsese said, "Hey, this part where the people are shooting each other, I need something bigger there." And he goes, "What? Bigger? It's perfect." And he said, "Well, yeah, I know. I'm sorry, but if you could try something else." He said, okay." So we had the orchestra play, and it's another one of his famous sounds. Uh, Intervals, actually. Let's say you're starting on a middle F natural, and you go an octave below to the E natural. So it's like bam, ba, and it's a. I know that sounds pretty weak, but that's and he just did that. The whole orchestra. Now you guys here, you play F, and the rest of you in the low section, you play that E. Let's try it. And he was able to lift his baton hand and do it. And Scorsese says, "That's it. Oh, thank you. Blah blah blah. That's it." But he was pissed. He was not a happy camper. His wife, who was I don't know how much younger than he was, maybe I would say 20 years, and she was helping him carrying his paraphernalia, whatever, and that was that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I heard that quite a few times that he was erratic, for the lack of the
Yeah,
better, yeah, for the lack of
yeah.
the better word, and that or curmudgeon, and
Much, that's the word.
yeah, yeah. And if I may throw in a little story, you probably know Paul Hirsch, the editor, who
I
won.
don't.
He won the Oscar for Star Wars, and he edited
Gee,
so many pictures, Mission Impossible, and so on and so forth.
Jesus. Okay.
Yeah, Paul Hirsch.
I'm
He's he,
embarrassed now. Okay.
he's a great editor, and he also wrote a nice book. And he worked with Brian De Palma a lot.
Okay.
And when Herman scored De Palma's film, they apparently they were sitting in a hotel lobby, and Herman came in, and at that time he already had a cane. And then Paul said that two people approached Bernard Herrmann asking for an autograph. And
Uh-oh.
and Paul said, I thought, oh boy, here we go.
Yeah.
But to his surprise, Herman not only gave them autographs, he signed what they asked him to sign, but he also drew a nice sketch of the first couple of notes of Psycho, I believe.
Oh, Jesus.
If I recall correctly, it was Psycho. And that's when Paul Hirsch said, I clearly realized that there were two sides to the man, because he thought Herman was gonna completely freak out. Yeah.
Yeah. Blow them off.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds right because I don't know. I think kind of mind that he had, I'm sure there was room in that brain of his to be, you know, curmudgeon versus sweetheart.
Mark, I know that this industry basically can be very stressful. You have to deal with many people. Some of them can be difficult, some of them are easy to deal with, and the whole climate of the industry, some people feel, has changed drastically, in terms of, the landscape of TV, the landscape of cinema. How would you describe how the whole industry has changed from the time you started out in the 70s to today?
Well, uh, I remember it was 1986 that all of a sudden this home studio electronic stuff was beginning to take hold, and I realized I had to choose, at least to invest in the home studio side, at least to get a foothold in it, and some of my colleagues said, well, that's bullshit. That'll never happen. And they went uh, they went away, unfortunately. So that was a a big deal for me. I remember this thing I invested in. It was called the Synclavier, and it was very expensive. It was like a down payment on a house, um, and now you could get it. Some of them, how many are left? Who knows? On Craigslist for $2,500. Uh, so I remember there was a composer His name was Brad Fidel. You probably interviewed him too, I would think, right?
Yes, yes, I
Yeah,
did.
yeah.
I did.
And he was getting a ton of TV work in pretty good TV movies, and people were going apeshit about him. He was getting called for almost everything. And I'm listening to the music and I'm thinking, wow, that is simple. How is he getting away with this stuff? And I realized it there's all kinds of ways, to score a picture. And it was very important that I heard that, because other people were saying, oh, that's so and so. That's not real music, or it's all that fake electronic stuff. But and I think he did, what was it, that Schwarzenegger big movie?
Terminator. Yeah, he did Terminator
Oh,
1,
yeah,
2, True Lies, Fright
yeah, yeah,
Night, The Serpent.
yeah,
Yeah, Serpent and the
yeah.
Rainbow for Wes Craven.
Right. Okay, enough about him. But no, just kidding. But he certainly showed that he was the real deal when he got into the movies. But nevertheless, he was kind of a big influence on me in terms of what people are liking, and that those early days, the 80s, I suppose, because I did a show called Heart to Heart, and that was all a small orchestra. Uh, there was no electronic anything in that, and that was from 81 to 85 or something like that. Uh, but it was after that, I got into the electronic thing, and I when I first did some scores, they were pretty rudimentary and simple, and I'm happy that I wasn't that they weren't thrown out. But it took me a while to really get the feel for it, to make it sound more natural, more like realistic, instead of just just sine waves and sounds like that. And then the X-Files came along, and I remember, oh God, there are some good stories about that, especially well, not especially, but apparently I was up for the X-Files with four or five other composers. And Chris Carter, the creator, lived in Pacific Palisades, which is on the west side of LA. And I lived in Santa Monica. So he's looking at the list of people. And luckily for me, he didn't have a cousin or a brother or a favorite composer he had worked with before. And he said, Santa Monica? That's close to me. Okay, let's go with him. Oh, okay, great. That's fine. Now, I saw the pilot of X-Files and I thought, okay, this is good. And they had put they had temp tracked the pilot with very just sustained stuff, nothing melodic, nothing. It might have been some orchestral stuff, but if it was just vapor. It was just like a sound design thing. Okay, fine. But then it was time to do the theme, and you probably know this story, don't you, Michael? Oh,
How the theme came about and the reverb with the when your elbow hit the.
shut up. Why am I doing this interview? You know everything already. Oh, no, but there's, a little bit
Go
more to
on, go on.
say. So Chris Carter sends me a bunch of CDs with every kind of his favorite music, right? Vocal music, pop music, classical music, etc., etc., etc. So I do first one, and it was what you'd think would be that kind of sound, jump, 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 something fast and loud. And he comes over and he hears that, and he's very nice and respectful and quiet. And he said, gee, that's good, but I think it should be a little more blah, 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 whatever. Okay, on to number two. Same exact thing happens. He comes over, gee, you're getting there, but blah, blah, blah. Okay, number three, same thing. And then I finally said, hey, and politely, I said, here, take your stack of CDs and get the hell out of here and let me start from scratch. He said, okay, that's fine. But just keep in mind, I'm really looking for something really simple. And that's a simple tune. So go for it. So I did. And you're right I did put my elbow down on the keyboard that had the repeated echoplex sound of ba ba da ba ba da ba ba da ba da ba, and that's the beginning of it. And I realized, oh, that's a good kind of middle section sound. Now, what about the low end? What should that be? Well, not much except a low pad of combination of low instruments. Okay. And how about the melody? Oh, okay. Here comes the melody. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, great. What should play it? How about the sax? Oh, no, horrible. How about the violin? No. How about trumpet? No. And I went through the whole list, and I came across this synth stop called Whistling Joe. And I used that, and I thought, oh, that's it. That's good. I also got my wife, who was a terrific whistler, to double it. And she said, yeah, that's good. Okay. And I said, you sure it's not TV horseshit? And she said, no. So then I said to Chris, come on over, check this out. He comes over, he hears it, and he goes, that's good. I like it. Yeah, that's it. That's good. Very good. Okay, we'll go with that. Okay, I'll see you later. Boom, Now, at that time, I had no idea that it would become, a big deal. But he did say, we have to play this for the executives at Fox. So I had a boombox at the time and put it on a cassette. And he said, I'll meet you at room, whatever it is, at 2:30 on Monday. Okay. I show up. He's there. And he said, oh, shit, I have to go to casting. You can handle this, I'm sure. So I'm thinking, oh, okay. I go in the room. There are three guys with that cliche wardrobe suits, three suits. Okay. And they're very nice, very conservative. I mean, in terms of, they were just nice. They say, okay, let's hear it. They hear it. And the first guy goes, oh, that is something. It is kind of and then he goes, Bob, and he goes to the next guy. What's Bob going to say? And Bob goes, it has a certain, I think, third guy, the same thing. It gives me a feeling, but no one said, wow, that's different. That's great. This is a sci-fi show. We were expecting big banging, crashing stuff. They just said, oh, well, thanks for, showing it to us. And I thought, oh, shit, where's this going? And so Chris calls and he said, well, it's going to be okay. They just are unfamiliar with, doing something interesting, but it's fine. Okay, so the thing comes out about 2 months later. This theme is getting to gain traction. People are talking about it. So the lead guy of that group of three calls me and he says, Mark, I said, yeah, this is Bob. Remember the meeting with the three of us? I said, yeah, I do. Didn't we tell you how amazing that music was? And because I started to get the Hollywood perspective of things, I said, Bob, thank you. Without you, this could have never passed muster. I really appreciate it. And tell your other two assholes that that they did good as well. Boom. So I love that story.
Oh man, oh man.
Yeah.
But the theme, thank you for telling that story. The theme also did very well chart wise, as I recall. You know, it certainly was up there. And do you feel that to a certain degree it has changed your life because you were able to get some more fame out of it, or do you feel it just remained the same?
No, it was, you know, it got, uh, there, I did get, a lot of work, because of it. But, a lot of people said, now, we know you did this X-Files thing, but we're looking for something different. I said, okay, great. So at least I was able to, get some traction from it. And, but, I remember I wrote a elongated part to the theme, which is only 35 seconds something. And that became the single, the record that was a hit in the UK and France and uh, some other places. So I remember the guy from one of the good guys from Fox in the music department, Jeff. Of course, I forgot his name. That was 30 years ago. He said, hey, you won't believe this, but the X-Files theme is number one in Britain and France and so and so. I said, wow, that's pretty great. And I remember walking out of the house, walking down the street, and just feeling all it takes, it's just one good idea. And that's what that was.
Uh,
So
Amazing. I know, and I think everybody knows this theme. It's so iconic. It's so well known. Yep.
the best part is, when I go to, well, right now I'm thinking doctor because of my ankle problem, and the guy says, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I write music for, TV shows and some movies. And he says, oh, anything I would have heard of? And I say, well, I don't know if you were alive in the 90s, but you might have heard of the X-Files, and the reaction sometimes is, holy shit, you did that? Oh my God, yeah, wow, that's amazing. Or meeting people, and my wife has been very serious about saying, look, we're going to this party, we're going to this event, and you shut your mouth about the goddamn X-Files. If someone asks, okay, you can say so, but don't walk in and say, hey, everyone, it's Mark Snow. And guess what I did? Oh, shit. No, no way. Oh, anyway, so I was able to cool it. I think one of the cute things, my daughter has the X-Files theme as a ringtone on her phone. And she went into some store and the guy was a total prick to her. And her phone goes off and he says, all of a sudden, I have great respect for you. I'm sorry if I was rude. Okay, great. So, anyway, enough of that.
Thank you. And how would you describe the atmosphere and the feel of the X Files? And how would you verbalize the whole design of the show and the setting and everything that goes with it?
Well, first of all, the whole arc of the 9, 10 years was basically separated between two things: the standalone episodes and the mythology shows that was sort of like serialized. One story, you know, continued to the next, to the next, to the next, like that. There was a group of writers, along with Chris, who were just so goddamn brilliant, came up with ideas for these shows that were, if someone told you about it, verbally, you could say, oh, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. But they were able to realize it, show them and shoot them. And I mean, you talk about, oh, here's this guy. He can squeeze himself into a keyhole and go into someplace. And another guy who's in the toilet and he pops out. And you go, oh, shut up. What the fuck are you talking about? But those shows were some great ones. I particularly I preferred sort of the standalones to the mythology because you could try everything on those shows, where the mythology had more of a a fake orchestra sound, on the synthesizer, but it was more traditional, but the standalone was anything you want. And at first they said, we like that whoosh, just that shh, nothing. And I did that for a few shows, and I thought, oh, this is terrible. This is going nowhere. So I tried some new things, and I thought, I crossed my fingers thinking, oh, what are they going to think of this? And they called up, and I don't know if it was one or two, whoever, and said, what are you doing? What is that stuff? And I said, well, let me ask you, do you like it? They said, yeah, it's great. What is it? I said, I can't explain it. Never mind. It doesn't matter as long as you like it. And then I was off and running.
Right. And I must say that I really loved the whole premise of the show. And it offered quite a lot. I mean, we are talking about 11 seasons and 2 movies. And I'm not going to ask you about your favorite episode.
Why not?
Why not? Because
I have the list right here.
You do?
Of course.
Then we need to get into that as well.
Okay, whenever you want.
I think it might be more interesting to at first talk about the creepiest episodes.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many lists that have been compiled over the years, top 10 creepiest, top 25
Right.
creepiest. I must say that there are certain episodes which I found scary as hell, which didn't even make it on their top 10 list. And I was like, why is
Yeah.
this not included? And I must say that some of the creepiest episodes were produced from, or let's say within the first 4 or 5 seasons of the show. And
Yeah.
especially season number 1 contained some unbelievably scary episodes. I remember Devil in Jersey, which was like episode number 4 or 5 of the first season. Scared the crap out of me as a kid.
That's called, I have to correct you, that's called the Jersey Devil.
The
Okay?
Jersey Devil. The
Yes.
Jersey Devil. Thank you. Thank you. That scared the crap out of me. And
Yeah.
Squeeze, the
That's
yeah,
what I was talking about. Yeah.
yeah, the Toombs character, and he
Yeah.
actually returns later on, but
Yes.
that was unbelievably creepy.
That actor is great. I forgot who he was, but he was fantastic.
Yeah,
And the casting, of all the shows, they found some of the most interesting people who were just perfect for these things.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Doug Hutchinson, I think, is his name.
Who? Oh,
Doug,
yeah, yeah. That's it. You know everything. Okay. I
Thank
should
you.
ask you now.
Yes, that was great. And I think the most controversial, or one of the
Yeah,
most controversial episodes, was called Home, in
correct.
episode number two of season four, if I recall correctly. I think they even used a disclaimer because,
Banned in banned in Budapest, actually, for real.
but it was also taken off American television for quite a while, right?
I don't exactly remember, except I remember that is one messed up episode, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
really, they really went, whoa, all out on that.
And I don't think you would get away with that in today's environment. I don't know. I think the X Files were pretty ahead of its time. That's what I believe. And I think some of the stuff they did back then, I'm sure certain people were not too happy about. But in today's world, I don't think you could pull that off and get away with it.
I, I, I can't answer that. I don't know, but there have been some seriously, you know, disturbing themes and episodes of the show.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Hmm. Which episodes would you say were particularly difficult to score for whatever reason? Be it a struggle with the producers, or getting the story right, or whatever reason.
Um, that's a that's a great question, and I hope this is you're going to be happy with the answer, which is first of all, and most importantly, I never ever thought there was an episode that was particularly bad. That was really off. Although I would get calls from some of the producers and directors, hey, Mark, hey, it's so and so. Hey, we need help. Oh, man, you got to go crazy on this one. It really sucks. And I would say, oh, well, sure. And I'd look at it and I go, what is he talking about? It's fantastic. Okay. But I had such, it was, there was one other section of my career that was equally wonderful, but the X Files was so incredible for me because everybody was so nice and they were so respectful. And if they wanted a change, you know, to be made, I would be completely accommodating. And I don't think there was one, I think they all came to my studio for every single episode. It's either a producer and a director, just a producer, two producers, whatever. And I lived close to the studio. And I think they thought, oh, this is going to be fun. We'll go to Mark's, we'll listen to the music, we'll get out of the studio, and hopefully, he does a good job. We'll have a great old time. And that's what it was, and it was never anything like, oh shit, you got to start from scratch. This is terrible. Or when monster comes out of the closet, just give us a little more of a bang. Yes, easy. So simple, mostly simple things. But, that whole experience was, for me, it was like doing a mini movie every week. Um, Especially as I said, the standalones, because I could, let's try this, let's try this. Oh, this is a funny sound. Let's put that in here. And they would just they would like it. They would go for it. And that's why, for me personally, those 9, 10 years of working on it were the greatest for me.
have you ever faced a scheduling issue on the X-Files when they initially gave you a week or two to score an episode and later on they came back and said, well, by the way, we changed that. It's only 2 days now.
Yeah, the people talk about that a lot with TV shows, having no time or we changed this or that. But once they locked, that means the picture, that was it. They didn't usually add, a close up or something. They might have, but it had no real impact. And as far as the schedule went, I was having such a good time. If they said you have 3 days to do it, eeks, I would say okay. It it was more like 5 to 7 days, and that was fine. But the thing is that there was a ton of music in these shows, which did make it a little more daunting than some other things I've done or that are out there.
What do you think took them so long to have a resurgence of the show? Because there was quite a hiatus between season number 9, 10, and also 11.
Right. I you know I think must have been people at Fox saying, uh, people are watching this all over the world and they're asking, when is there more? Let's do more. So that's where I think that came from. Unfortunately for me, when they mixed the show, combining the music and the dialogue and the sound effects, etc., the music was way off to the side and it was very disappointing. And in the next round of shows, let's say call it season 10, I thought some of the shows were absolutely spectacular. And I was happy to hear that music was played at a better level. But some of those were so brilliant and well thought out, and they went out with a bang with the TV part of it. Yeah.
That's for sure. And I think some people were disappointed and even downright pissed off when Robert Patrick was added. Also, of course, because the story dictated that.
Yeah.
How did you experience that? Because also obviously you have been watching all of the episodes over and over again when you had to work on them.
The thing is, for this interview, it doesn't matter to me what I say. So I'll tell you the truth. If someone hears it and says, "Oh, fuck Mark Snow, he's all wrong, blah blah blah," I don't give a shit. I thought Robert Patrick was good in his part, but when he took over, I didn't think it had the oomph of Duchovny. And actually, Duchovny had a real interesting kind of quiet. Some people thought, oh, he was really not a real actor, but he's got something with him, and the relationship with him and Scully was magical. And at the beginning they were two kids and they were like floundering around, and they as they grew with the show, they filled in all the blanks and became just fabulous, just fantastic. But bringing anyone in to replace them, no matter how good they were, to me it was a little less good, if you know what I mean.
Yes, absolutely. And I know that can be kind of hard to accept at first when a change of this magnitude is being made. I certainly didn't mind it as much as other people because I also believe that Robert Patrick is a talented actor, and but I certainly understand anybody's feelings and sentiments about the
Yeah, but the thing is that the writing was still good, the directing was still good, and you know, the casting was around them was all good, and so I I, I think it wasn't a huge deterrence or detriment.
Yeah, but that wasn't the only significant change which they made. At some point, I think at the end of season 5,
Yeah,
they also changed the location from Vancouver to Los Angeles.
right.
To me, that made quite the difference because I was, of course, used to the Vancouver environment and what it brought to the show, the whole let's say environment and how it elevated the atmosphere of the show. That was really important to me, and I noticed immediately that something was off and something must have been changed dramatically. And then they moved to moved the production to Los Angeles. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good point because they took advantage of all that rural part of Vancouver with the woods and the trees and the small towns and the desolation and the you know real ultra simplistic blue collar characters, etc., that had a feeling that was really it was really X-Files because that's where it started, and that was I think it was maybe it was Duchovny who said, look, I'm not doing it anymore unless you move it to LA because I don't want to be up there and my family, et cetera, et cetera. But I kind of agree with you. I think Vancouver had a natural kind of setting where the location managers could go all over the place and find, unique, sites, locations. Yeah.
yeah, and of course it's a fantastic scenery and also fantastic location. But I think to a certain degree, I think tax benefits also play a big part, and not necessarily on the X Files, but maybe on other productions. You never know what's gonna happen, but it adds so much. And recently I was rewatching the show, a Netflix show called Devil in Ohio.
Okay.
It was also shot in Vancouver, and I think it's
Yeah.
one of the best miniseries of the past couple of years, and
Wow.
the whole atmosphere was also largely attributed to the location of Vancouver.
Yeah.
You couldn't have possibly shot that in a sunny in a bright environment, which
Right.
is it wouldn't have worked.
Yes.
It would have taken the quote unquote shine of the
Yes.
production. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's important, and I think some people overlook that because for some reason they don't pay attention to it.
Yeah.
And I also was going to mention the importance of a main title, but I think a main title, not only in terms of music but in terms of images,
Exactly.
is so important because it sets the tone for the show. And recently I started rewatching Millennium, which you also
Yes.
scored, which was also created by Chris Carter. I think Millennium was extremely well done. It's still saddens me that they only got to produce 3 seasons, but I think it was, especially the first season, was tremendous, and the music and the marriage of the images, it was of the main title, it was fantastic.
I appreciate it, and that was sort of a similar thing with the guys sending me some music. Listen to this. It should be like this. Okay, but there was one thing they sent. There was a band where it had I think a female violinist. You probably know the name, but I forgot. And I thought, wow, that could be cool. Like a it was sort of Celtic, you know. And I thought, oh, that could be a real kind of spooky, dark, you know, almost, old medieval in a way sound, and these two big thuds, boom, boom, you know. Uh, but I just loved that. That was another show I felt I could do almost anything with.
The next question is hypothetical, but why do you think the X Files were so much more successful than Millennium?
That's a good question because the lead actor in Millennium, and you know who that was, Lance,
Henriksen.
thank you, was phenomenal. He had that kind of dry, you know, it's going to be okay, but he wasn't perturbed about too many things. And he was a little, walking around a little depressed, perhaps. And don't worry, we'll figure it out, or, like that. But they had some dark, excuse the expression, some serious dark shit on that show, being buried alive and being cooked in a giant microwave. I mean, but again, the stories and the casting was fantastic. And I think a few of the same writers as X Files. But I think because every episode was kind of like, ooh, we are, almost in this dark place where there's no sunlight. It's all cloudy,
Yeah.
sort of rainy. And oh man, I that's the only thing I can think about because there's a fan base for that show that goes on today that is not giving up on trying to coax the powers to be to do a movie of Millennium, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. And,
So
and on top of that, Millennium never received this kind of deluxe treatment when it comes to home video presentation. There's no Blu-ray. The
yeah, yeah,
the DVD set has been out of print for years.
yeah.
It's not available on Disney Plus, even though it was released through Fox. Maybe they don't have the rights anymore. I would have to double check that. But I
I don't
think,
think so. I don't think so. I just think, there were a group of people who thought, the X-Files had, as you know, had some comic episodes.
mhm.
But Millennium, oh man, you know, just did not. There was a lighthearted movie here, moment here and there, but few and far between. I think they all thought from the get-go, oh Jesus, who's going to watch this thing? This is depressing,
Yeah.
you know.
But
And yet, on the other hand, it was just fantastic, I
yeah,
thought.
yeah. But I think the ratings at first were great, but then I think towards the end of the first season they had a decline in viewership.
Yeah,
But if I recall correctly, and they tried to change the tone of the first season, and season two, I remember being a bit different because
yeah,
the first season was really the heavy artillery.
yes, yeah,
That's for sure.
yeah.
But it was fantastic, and I hope there will be a deluxe Blu-ray set. I still have the US DVD set, and they also need to re-release the score. It was released a couple of years ago, and
Yeah.
I think it deserves a re-release too.
Well, that would be nice, sure. Yeah.
Has nobody ever approached you ever since the set sold out?
Well, no, none of the recordings of any of that music, X-Files, Millennium, etc., had much to do with me, except someone would call up from Fox and say, "Hey, we had a request from this record company to put the music out. Is that okay with you? And I said, oh, of course not. No, no, yes, sure, sure, it's fine. So they,
Let's
because I don't own it, they can't come to me to ask permission.
Yeah, that's always a tricky part. But the question was not aimed at asking you for permission necessarily, but asking for a cooperation,
Sure.
in terms of
Yeah, of
presentation and or remixing the material or
course.
polishing. But in terms of the whole musical approach, X-Files and also Millennium, you did use a lot of digital instruments and also sampled instruments. Was that mainly due to time constraints, or was it also a budgetary issue
You mean having a synth score as
versus the orchestral elements? Yeah,
yes, it well, I had some live soloists, but having an ensemble or a mini orchestra or so and so, that was really uh, time consuming, would be time consuming, budget consuming, because there's so many steps that take place. You have to write the music, you have to get it orchestrated, you have to get it copied, and then the musicians are called, and you have to get the studio lined up, and then it's recorded, and then the music has to be transferred over to the dubbing stage. And I mean, for me, to be honest, and a lot of people will say, oh, that Mark Snow guy and his synthesizer stuff, that's nothing. But I remember, who Mike Post is, right? Of course, the most successful TV composers of all time. I mean, L.A. Law.
of
Oh God!
course.
I mean, look at his credit list. And one time he said to me, some people have sort of said some nasty things about me, and I said, oh, that's too bad. And he said, what I say to them is nothing succeeds as much as success or something. I mean, the point was, you know, you can say whatever you want, but it's been successful, you know.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and of course,
oh no, I know what it was. He says you can't argue with success. And people can think what they think, but that's true. So,
yes, and of course, you can't please everybody, and some people, like to complain for whatever reason, and I think especially the internet today is completely filled and also poisoned with the negativity, and people trying to convince everybody that of course they are right and the other person is wrong, and I need to shit on everybody because I'm Mr. Know-it-all and the whole bullshit. I don't believe in that, and I don't see why anybody would want to waste their time arguing with people. Just listen to the music that you love and watch the films that you love without
right.
the constant debate bullshit.
Yes, that's right. You're right. And it takes a person like you, because I saw the list of people you have interviewed, and it's like, holy shit, that is everybody, and a bunch of people I don't know of because of, their producers or sound people or whatever. But I certainly knew, I'd say at least 95% of all the composers. And I'm thinking, God damn it, that's impressive.
Thank you, thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah,
And I know what you do is great, because even from the the time I've had with you now, you're very good at this, asking the right questions. And some of these interviews, as you can imagine, are really boring and kind of pointless, but you're very good
Thank you.
at what you do. Yeah.
Thank you. That means a lot. I wish that people would focus more on what's really important. Also in terms of fulfilling your own goals and try to accept other people's opinions. And I think the industry today, to a large extent, relies too much on effects and the flavor of the month kind of thing. And
Hmm.
I think that good storytelling, sadly, on a few occasions takes a backseat to effects and to, well, how do I put this? The expression I think is oftentimes it's more sizzle than steak.
That's well put. Yeah, you're right. And you're talking about when I got started and the competition. Well, now the competition is insane. Why? Because because I've done 20 years of teaching at NYU in New York in the summer, a class of young composers who want to get in the business, et cetera, et cetera. And the thing is that all of these people all have home studios and they can all make demos of their music. And some of them are goddamn great, and some of them are less great, and some of them are awful. Okay. And the main question is, but, everyone has this, and can show, send music to some place if they want to do a music for a commercial or a industrial movie or a 10-minute short movie or something. And, you know, I could go into what I tell them, but I don't know if you want to hear about that.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
so,
yeah. But the interesting part is, the advancement in the field of technology does not necessarily make anybody, a great writer or a great director or a great editor. The tools which you have and which you can purchase at a large, sometimes at a great, sometimes it's costly, sometimes it's rather inexpensive. But if I were to use Avid Media Composer, which so many of Hollywood's greatest editors use, the fact that it's at my disposal doesn't mean that I can cut the picture in a proper fashion.
yeah, but getting back to, uh, I think about some of the new people, composing, coming up now. Um, I really think you have to put the electronics and all that home studio stuff aside and see if you can hear some real serious composing, which is the thing that, separates the what from the what, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, and it makes me think of learning, taking composing lessons or courses at the great schools. That's great. That's important. But I feel most of the successful composers are born with a natural kind of musical ability that can never be taught. And those are the lucky ones.
I know that you have a great variety when it comes to your projects, but of course you do have a certain amount of, let's say, projects which are or which lean on the kind of mystery side of things, the supernatural also. Ghost Whisperer, for instance, is another show which comes to mind. How do you respond to this kind of a subject matter? How do you respond to that storytelling aspect musically? Because I think dealing with mystery or the supernatural elements can be very tricky, but how do you respond to that as a person, as a composer?
Well, I'm naturally a really kind of miserable, angry, depressed person. So I fit right into all this shit. How about that?
Good, thank you. Very
Yeah.
well.
No, no. Ghost Whisperer, you talk about mystery, yes, drama, yes, but it also had kind of a pseudo-religious quality to it with, the Ghost Whisperer can, see ghosts and so forth and so on. And it always had a sort of a religious metaphor ending, so let's put that aside from Millennium and X-Files, that's for sure. But you know, what I really need to say is that, after X-Files and let's say Millennium, and somebody would ask, and I'll tell you to ask me this. What other project or projects would you consider in your, that were your favorites, that were most important to you? And I can tell you about one that are you going to ask me yes or no?
Yes, I might.
I mean, if you have time, and it's not a long answer. So anyway, because of the X-Files, this incredible man, brilliant French director, his name it's pronounced Alain Resnais, and it's spelled Alain Resnais. He called me literally here and said, I'd like you to do my next movie. And I'm going, and your name was, what is it again? And he said, with the French, I'm sorry, monsieur, Alain Resnais, and I'm saying this. I cover the phone and I go to my wife and I said, Alain Resnais? She said, yes. Do you know who that is? Blah, blah, blah. Oops. Okay. So I got with him and I did his last 4 movies before he died. And that was an experience that I'll never forget. Oh my God. I mean, the first movie, we don't have to go into talking about all of them, but the idea that he just said to me, do whatever you want, well, okay, that doesn't happen too often. So I do and it happened to be an all synthesizer score, but with all acoustic samples, and it sounded really like the real thing. And I remember his editor was like the music editor, and came the day after I sent the music to Paris, the editor calls and he says, hi, this is Hervé, blah, blah, blah. And I want to talk to you about the music. I'm going, oh shit, what's this going to be? And he said, well, Monsieur Resnais says he loves it so much. He's so happy with you, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, holy shit. And if you look at this guy's background, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, you'll see some remarkable things, but when I went to Paris to meet him, he comes to the hotel. I'm so glad you're here. Hug, kiss, blah, blah, blah. And then this afternoon, we'll go to the editing room or the screening room, we'll watch the movie. And I said, great. I go there. And before the movie starts, he says to me, listen, I'm going out for a coffee or a bite to eat. When I come back and I find that you're still here, I'm going to take that to mean that you really would like to work on my film with me. And I'm thinking, are you fucking kidding me? I'm here with this great man, and he puts it to me like that. And I just nodded my head like, I understand, but I was thinking, You are what an amazing moment. This doesn't happen in Hollywood like ever when they say do whatever you want. So he comes back and he says, "Well, I see you're here." And I said, "Yes, I am, sir. Let's go forward." And all the rest of them were just great. And what he, I went up to his apartment and we went out to dinner. I mean, this was a, a dreamscape of a project. Never will be, you know, never happen again.
Wow. That's also an experience which nobody should ever take for granted because I don't think it happens too often. And and I know it can be a really big struggle to really deal with executives and producers because
Oh, God.
oftentimes you get like 10 or 15 producers
Oh,
on a picture.
and who don't agree with each other on top of it.
Yes.
That's insane. But here was one man, he was the end of the line. It was just everything was up to him. And to put a little pin in it, I got a César nomination for that first score. And I'm sure you know what César is in
Yeah.
France.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The French Oscar.
Yes. I didn't win because they said an American. Oh, horse shit. Anyway, so
But speaking of not winning, I didn't mean to bring this up, but how was it possible to acknowledge your work 15 or 17 times at the Emmys and never actually award it? How the hell is that possible?
well, I think I've thought about that, a few times, obviously, but I think when I look back on the scores that were nominated with me, most of them were traditional scores, live orchestra of some sort. And I think there was you'll like this one moment where I was asked by what was it called? The American Association of Orchestrators and Arrangers. And this was a group in Hollywood of men like 70 plus, okay, who had some great careers in the 30s, 40s, 50s, etc. And they wanted me to talk to them, because I was getting, noticed. And let's get this guy. Let's see what he has to say. And oh God, I remember talking to them, and someone said, "Well, how do you do it? What's your process?" And I said, "Well, I get the film and I start improvising around with it. And then I hit on some tune or some sound or some texture that I really like. And that's it. And then someone says, "You mean you don't write anything down?" And I said, "That's true." And I could feel everyone kind of going, "Oh, that. And I think it could be, I'm just paranoid, but I think the word might have spread. Hey, this guy isn't a real composer. He's just messes around with electronic stuff. And, you know, the good news about all of that, it didn't hurt me one bit.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating, certainly.
Yeah.
But, you know.
It's certainly weird as to how that happened because let's face it, so many great composers never won any major award.
Right. Yeah.
Golden Globe, Academy
Yeah.
Award, the Oscar. Tom Newman, 14, 15,
Yeah.
15.
Yeah. There's a good story when he did that score, American Beauty. Is that it?
Yeah, 1999. Yeah, American Beauty.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
You know, all of a sudden, here comes the marimba. He comes up with this marimba sound that everyone is crazy for. They just love it. They take this music, they temp track it, and every movie coming out, and and he's the odds-on favorite to win Academy Award. And I don't know if you know when they have the Academy Awards, and the nominees are so and so for this, so and so for that. they show the people in the audience, right? And the winner is, and he was out of his chair and he didn't win. And I thought, next time I go to another Emmy thing and the nominations are, and Mark Snow, blah, 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 I'm not getting out of my seat. Well, I didn't have to, but I just thought, you know, you never you never know. That might be a bitchy thing for me to say, but he was halfway up, and I wouldn't want to be him at that moment. It was like a natural. It was like everyone was talking about this score, how wonderful and new and fresh and creative, and it was just perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
So
But take a look at the group of people that have never been given the Academy Award across
yes,
across the board. I mean,
yes,
let's talk about composers.
yes,
Newman, all of the Thomas Newman,
yes,
David Newman,
yes,
James Newton Howard,
yes,
Alan Silvestri,
yes,
Danny Elfman,
righto,
Marco Beltrami.
yes.
The list goes on and on. It's alarming, and
I thought you might were going to ask me what are some of my favorite scores of all time. Well, there are thousands and thousands, but one of them was the original Planet of the Apes, Jerry Goldsmith.
fantastic.
Yeah, and that was so inspiring to me, that music with that 12-tone aleatoric, approach, which just, I thought, how they really let him do that,
Yeah, it
but
was.
he did win for The Omen. I think that's right. So at
Yeah,
least he was recognized for that, which was fantastic with the big chorus and all that stuff. But you're right.
we did talk about the input of producers and directors and the struggle which you might have faced several times. But what do you think is the best or even the brightest suggestion a producer or director ever made in terms of music and approach?
Well, sometimes some director, producer will say something that'll be so like he's a musician, like he's a composer, and I'm thinking, how the hell did he come up with that? But mostly it's about loud, soft, fast, slow. That's too slow, that's too fast, that's too many low notes, too many high notes or something. But working with the equipment that I have and someone comes over, it's very easy to make these changes right then and there. And also, I think in terms of suggestions to composers, and I saw John Williams do it, and I'll tell you what I mean. It's very important to kind of, in a proper way, suck up to these people, to be polite, to be, patient. If they say, God damn it, this thing, what is that thing, that symbol thing? I said, oh yeah, that's a symbol thing. I just don't like it. Just take it out. And I would, usually say, well, okay, great. And I was saying, here's the fun part. Watch. And I push this button, boom, it's gone. What do you think? Oh, great. Very good. But, also someone walks in who I haven't worked with before, and I say, I have to say your movie so-and-so is just great. I'm a big fan, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's kind of, if you mean it and it's natural, that's fine. But I've seen quite a few colleagues argue, with a director or a producer, and probably with good reason. If someone says, oh, this is that melody is too many notes, you know, simplify it. And someone will say, well, I don't think so. I thought, and they think they're showing you know, how much character they have and intelligence or something. Boom, gone. Anyway, John Williams, I was invited to a screening of the very first Home Alone
Mm.
movie. Okay, it was a screening at MGM, which is now Sony. He was in the front row or down front, a bunch of people, the studio, the director, the producer. And that was a fun movie. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah,
Right?
I love it. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great.
I still watch it every year. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And the score, how could he go wrong? I mean, he's in terms of the big orchestra traditional scores, no one's better than him. He's the best. So the movie is over, and you'd see the people go, what's going on? They're talking with each other. And then John Williams just stands right up and says, guys, hold it. I just want to say this is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. You've done a brilliant job. And then he would call out the director, Mr. So-and-so. I know how you got that shot and blah, blah, blah. And he's just sucking up to them like crazy. And then he says, in fact, I really would love it. I'd love to see it again. And they said, oh, certainly. They were just, gobsmacked by this guy. And they said, well, when would you like to see it? He said, right now. You tell that projectionist, I want to see that movie right now and make them stay and show it to me all over again. And they're just on cloud nine. They're floating out of the room. Oh my God, he loves it. The great John Williams. He could have gotten up and said, very good. I'm glad to be on the project and taken off, you know. Uh, and I saw Lalo Schifrin do that he did the original pilot of Starsky and Hutch
Hmm.
TV. And it was Spelling Goldberg, and I was there too, just as an observer. And he gets up and says, oh my God, this is so wonderful. I am so happy to be associated with this. And they were, they're floating out of the room.
Yeah. Lalo Schifrin was or is a great composer. Have you ever heard the Lalo Schifrin William Friedkin story? That allegedly
The Exorcist?
The Exorcist. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's Friedkin
Yeah.
allegedly took Lalo's tape and threw it out of the window.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Has that ever been verified, or is it just
It's
bullshit?
pretty, it's pretty much nobody wants to, take it to the judge, if you know what I mean, and spread it all over the internet. But yeah, you know, and I think, and here's where you're the expert. You would know for sure. I think, wasn't it Mike Oldfield who finally did that score, or who did that score?
It's a combination of a few elements. The tubular bells
Yeah.
is definitely in there, and I think there is Penderecki or Penderecki
Oh, okay, okay.
in there as well. So it's a combination
Yeah.
of a few artists and sources. And Bernard, there's also this story which Friedkin told that Bernard Herrmann was to write the score, and that then Herrmann allegedly said, "I think I can save this piece of crap. Just
Oh,
give me a few days, and I will fix."
yeah.
I don't know if that's true, but allegedly,
That
they,
could be. I mean, knowing him, that could absolutely, be true. Uh, it was Kubrick as well who borrowed a lot of, you know, very avant-garde classical pieces, Bartok, Shostakovich, Stravinsky, to put in some of his movies, including Blue Danube Waltz for you know what. Um, but uh, you talk about Friedkin. I just saw again the French Connection, which
Mm.
is beyond belief how he got away with some of those things in the city under the train tracks, and he didn't get permission for half of that stuff, and he said, fuck it, I'm going out there and I'm just going to do what I want to do. And that's one of probably in the top three action movies of all time, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's a very good film. I think William Friedkin did tremendous movies. I mean, the French Connection,
Yeah,
the Exorcist.
yeah.
I also like some of his later work. I love Blue Chips, the basketball comedy
Oh,
with
yeah, 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 yeah.
good, good stuff.
That
And
that score of the French Connection was that jazz trumpet guy. You know who? I don't remember his
yeah,
name.
but I'm drawing a blank. The
Yeah.
heat is yeah, getting to me.
And that was very little jazz and mostly, sound design with live instruments. And boy, that worked. And I remember seeing Gene Hackman do all those stunts. And I looked it up and it said that was him. There was no stunt man. He was the guy who was jumping over fences and rolling on the ground and beating up guys. And holy shit. I mean, anyway, God, you make me think of 8 million topics. We could probably go on for another hour and a half or
Yeah,
so.
yeah. But
You
I don't want to take up too much of your time. And I would like to talk about scoring or underscoring a dialogue scene because I think that can be very tricky, especially when it comes to the final mix. Should the music be a little louder? Let's say, how loud does the dialogue need to be so the music doesn't distract the audience for whatever reason? And especially during the X Files. So when I was watching the X Files, I noticed that the level of the music is really high up at times.
that's in the first 8, 9 years. That's true, exactly. And I
Yes.
thought, oh, that's pretty good. I had nothing to do with that. It was Chris Carter who went to the first mix, and he was getting such good positive feedback about the music. He told the mixers, I want this music up there. And they would say, no, but wait a minute. What about the dialogue? He said, I don't care. Let's hear the music. So uh, I wasn't going to argue with anybody about that,
Yeah.
but in terms of what I think it should be, Jesus, every time I see something with drums under dialogue, or classical military drums, I'm thinking, well, that works, and then I see, mid-range woodwinds. Oh, that's very nice too, and the strings, that's good. But I think in general, it's about nothing, in a overly simplified way, nothing too high and nothing too low, you know. And there's so many Netflix and cool streaming movies and shows out now where there's some very wonderful, imaginative, synth guys who are just fantastic. And a lot of it is pulse. There's always some kind of a but the sound they chose to do that, that's a big part of it, I think.
Yeah.
Choosing the right sound. But fast or slow, it depends. And when you get a call from, and I would say, hey, what about that dialogue scene? Oh, it worked great. And I would go, oh, okay. Or how about that dialogue scene? Oh, we had to take some of the strings out, or the okay, whatever,
Yeah. I think it can be tricky to also write around dialogue, and oftentimes I feel that the mix isn't loud enough, and not in terms of the X Files, because I think
Yeah.
sometimes also in movies the mix certainly isn't loud enough, and they ask a composer to write this really bold and beautiful and great score, and sometimes it for whatever reason it just gets buried, underneath
Yeah,
the sound design and whatever. So I think sometimes the wrong decision is being made, but yeah,
that's one of you know, the miserable things of not being in control of that. And we all have to cross our fingers and hope it's going to sound good. And sometimes it isn't, sometimes it's not,
yeah.
you know.
And Mark, throughout your career, have you ever encountered, let's say, a scenario where a request was being made which was completely unreasonable and unrealistic?
I would have to say no. The worst thing I could think of is someone making a dumb comment. And then I would tell these students at NYU, you have to be good at being a translator, and knowing what they mean, even if many directors will come in and say, I don't know anything about music, but, and then they'll make a comment and I'll say, listen, it doesn't matter if you know anything about music. How does it make you feel? Can you describe it? And they'll say, oh, God, that's nice of you. Thank you for letting me off the hook. And because I don't know a tuba from a violin, I said, does it get the point across? And he said, well, mostly, but I'd like it if this part was, and, as soon as you make them feel comfortable, I think that's helped me. That was a big deal for me, being able to try to understand the abstract comments from a lot of these people and then try to decipher it and wheedle around it and through it and come up with something, you know. I'm sure sometimes I'd come up with something and they'd go, oh, that's fine, and walk out and say, oh, fuck him, I'll never use him again, you know. But I think for the most part, I think I loved working with people. The bad part about being composer is you're all alone unless you're not doing a live score every week, you know. But you're alone and you're doing it, and is this good and blah blah blah. And I would, cute story, my wife, I would say, oh, you got to hear this. I think this is great. She'll come up to studio and listen, and she said, I think that is absolutely great. I also thought it was great when Mancini did that as well. And I said, whoops, okay, sorry. She must have heard it was from who knows what, Breakfast at Tiffany's or Charade or some great Mancini score. Mm.
Yeah,
So,
that can happen. Sometimes you just for no particular
yeah,
reason come up with something which has already been used.
yeah,
That's inevitable, I think.
yeah, yeah.
Looking back at your great career, what do you think was the boldest move which you ever made, or something that was really which exceeded expectations but wasn't likely to be a winner at first?
There was one project where it was this director was kind of told by either the studio or the producer that he had to work with me. Okay. But he didn't like me. I mean, not personally. He didn't like my music. And I could feel it. He comes into the room and he's he's not rude, but he's not pleasant. Hi, how are you? Okay, let's go. You have something? I said, yes, yeah. All right. Sit here. And it was a show about this little girl trapped in a mine, falls in a mine, a true story, a TV movie. And I don't know, he thought, that I was the X-Files guy and there was nothing I could do that was melodic or sweet or sympathetic or, you know, like that. So I, oh, and Scully too, I'll tell you about that. But, he hears this first piece and it's basically this theme and it's very, very sweet and gentle. Uh, and he's sitting there and he goes, do that again. Okay, do it again. And then he has the nerve to say, I didn't think you could do that kind of thing. That's just beautiful. And I said, well, I don't give a fuck as long as you like it. And we became really good friends after that. So that's not, I don't think, about being particularly bold or about trying something that is so, unexpected. I mean, it was unexpected for him because he thought it was going to be,
Okay.
like that. But then I remember Gillian Anderson Scully directed an episode. It was very good, and it was kind of new agey in a way. And the editors, and she was coming to my studio, and she did. The editors called and said, man, you better fasten your seatbelt. She is a fucking bitch. She is on a tear. She's ripping us a new one every time we see her, etc., etc. And the other people said, oh, you God, we feel sorry for you. This is going to be horrible. Get ready. So, so she pulls up in her Porsche, excuse me, and comes in with her lunch, her salad in a plastic container. And she comes in, and my wife is there, and she says hello to her. Yeah, hello. And she said, okay, where are we going? I said, okay, this way to the studio. Okay. She sits on the floor, puts the lunch down, crosses her legs. She said, okay, let's go. And I'm going, oh, fuck. Is she going to pick up the food and throw it in my face? What's going to happen here? And it was that same kind of thing. She hears it and she says, wow, that's really great. I wasn't expecting that. I thought you were going to do. And I said, and she says, okay, well, that's the first piece. Let's hear the rest of it. And I thought, oh, shit, here it comes. And listens to the whole thing. Very happy. Goes out in the kitchen, gets very friendly with my wife. Turns out to be one of the sweetest people I met in terms of someone coming to listen to music. So, who knows? Luckily, I think my instinct about a lot of these things has been more on the right side than the left. Not being political here, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so ultimately she was easy to work with even though everybody else had basically warned you.
Yeah. I mean, it was as if after she had the confidence after this first piece, which she was ready to go fucking ballistic on it, that I think she felt, comfortable to relax into the rest of it. And so,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah. Amazing. And that must have been a big relief. But I think that's funny because sometimes people get really tense in certain situations and they rip somebody a new one, even though they are really basically a very likable person and very sweet. But some people do have a terrible reputation, and everybody warned them. Oh God, just don't work with XYZ. That's gonna be hell on earth. And then they actually work together, and it turns out it's fantastic.
Yeah, but it's because music is an abstract thing. If the director comes over and he knows he's going to hear Shostakovich, for sure, and he's going to hate it, and that's that. But when he's hearing a brand new original composition, you cross your fingers again and hope that they like it.
Have you ever had that kind of experience where you said, just one more word from this guy, and I'm gonna walk off the project, if I may ask?
Uh, right. I know I've thought of, boy, this guy, he's way off. He doesn't know what he's talking about, but I'm going to try to, as I say, translate and decipher what he means and see if we could come to an agreement. And that seems to have happened most of the time, which I think, and I don't mean to be egotistical about it, I think that's been one of my, saving graces, a reason for a lot of my success. I'm able to coddle these people and make them feel comfortable. And, and if someone says, I think it should be this, and then I'll say, well, let's give it a try. Boom. And I'll try it. And he'll say, or she'll say, I'm wrong. You were right. So you never know.
Before we wrap up, I would like to ask you about Smallville. Just
yes.
You've written a great series of main titles, and for some reason, Smallville used a part of a song.
Yes.
Was that the intention right off the bat, or did you write a main title which was ultimately dropped? What went on there?
No, you got it right the first time. They wanted that song. And that guy who did it, I forgot who the hell that was, not that it matters, but he was hot at the time. And whatever that song was, and I don't remember that.
Yeah.
They just loved it. Well, I wasn't going to argue with them. There you go. But I didn't write anything. They didn't ask for anything. So, but I do remember they had some critics come and see it before it was on the air. And the score was mostly in a traditional way, or orchestral way. And they actually tempted it with some John Williams. And that's what they showed to the critics, right? And they said, and again, it was like, and the wonderful John Williams music, or Mark Snow's wonderful John Williams kind of music, okay, I'll take it.
Right.
So
allow me one last question. Of all the projects which you've done, which score or set would you like to have re-released or released in proper fashion in the first place?
Well, I think, the music to the movies for Alain Resnais, that would be fantastic, because some of that stuff I'm so proud of. And then, as you said, Millennium, that's it.
Mark, is there anything else you would like to add?
You know what? Since this has been so enjoyable, I can't tell you how enjoyable this has been for me. Your knowledge of so many things is really extraordinary. I think you're one of the best people at doing this, and smart questions, and it's been an absolute pleasure. So, see, I'm sucking up to you now. That's the
I don't mind that, but thank you. I mean, your feedback means a lot, and it really does. And I'm glad you enjoyed the conversation, because I certainly did. And thank you very much. Thank you for taking so much time out of your schedule. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Michael. It was great.
Goodbye. Thank you.